Okay, so super excited to have you here. Like I said, I'm thankful that you're here. So the question I have some questions for you. I hope you're ready. So
I'm not, but we'll figure it out.
and so we can just start light. So for you, I know it's kind of the type of household you grew up in. So how did your relationship with God start?
So, grew up in church, actually. My parents were volunteer ministers for literally my whole life. Still to this day, they volunteer in the church. And so, grew up in church from the time I was a baby. I think I got saved, as a kid. Filled with the Spirit, like 8 years old. So, been in church my whole life. The doors were open, we were there. So, pretty much, I can't remember a time when I didn't, know of God or know of faith. So.
And with that, you were saying growing up, you grew up in the church, but you said with your parents, you sometimes didn't feel the best about being Christian because you felt like sometimes they were hypocrites. So what would you say to, sometimes people think Christians are hypocrites. They think they'll say one thing, but they'll live something out in a different way. So what's your take on that when people say, why would you be a Christian when you guys are all hypocrites?
I think that had you asked me that question when I was younger, my response probably would have been differently. Just to give you guys some background on the reason why he's asking that question. So, growing up in church, my parents were the kind of people that, if there was a service, if there was an event, if the church was open for any reason and people were allowed to be there, our family was there. So we were very, very dedicated to whatever church we were attending, wherever God had us. But the problem that I had with that was I would see that type of response to Christianity, yet at home, my parents fought all the time. They argued in front of us. I never saw them read their word. I never saw them pray. So at home, I literally just saw this different lifestyle. My dad struggled with alcoholism, and so he was an alcoholic for a long time, ended up getting delivered, but for years he struggled with any problem that would come his way. He would go to alcohol first rather than God. So I'd have my parents preaching this one message of, you got to get to church. If the doors are open, we got to honor God. We got to be there, and then go home to see them living this lifestyle that said everything opposite of that. And so, of course, as a teenager, I struggled with that, so it caused me to stray away from God, because I'm like, if this is what Christianity looks like, and if people are hypocritical like this, and if they focus their lives on God at church, but change completely when they're outside of church, that's not for me. I'm not like that. I try to be real, I try to be raw. And I think the biggest lesson now that I'm older and I can look back on that is I think it's important for people to just be real with where they're at in their relationship with God. Stay committed to church, stay consistent in your attendance, but also don't be afraid to say, I'm here so much because I'm broken. And I need to be here because I recognize that there's something that God offers to me that can fix the broken mess that my life is. And my problem was that my parents would never, they weren't open about that. Mm-hmm. They were put on this show while they're at church and then come home and live a life of hell. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing is I'm proud of all of y'all, just be real with where you're at. I'm proud of everybody for coming to church today, but if you're struggling and you're living a life outside of here that's different, guess what? God doesn't look down on you. God just desires that you're open and honest about where you're really at, and allow him and recognize y'all, we all have a need for Jesus. Nobody needs him more than the next person. No matter I need Jesus just as much as the alcoholic who doesn't know him. We all need him. So.
Yeah, I think that's so true. We all need Jesus at the same exact level. We sometimes think we have to be perfect to accept Jesus or have Jesus or to say we're a Christian. And I think that's a lot of times why people struggle to claim their faith or say they're Christian, because they know we're going to fall short. But God says in his word, we all fall short of the glory of God. And we all will fall short. Everyone here has fallen short. I know I have lots and lots of times. But we know this journey of faith is not about perfection, but about progression. It's moving forward until where God wants you to go. With that, you got close to your faith when you were 18, going to a camp. What happened, and then what things did you do when you got ignited on fire for God?
So I had 18 years old, my senior year of high school. So from 15 to 18, I literally was just living for the world. Everything I could think of that the world had to offer is what my life was about. I definitely was not ever accused of being a Christian by any of my classmates in high school.
With that, what's living like the world?
So, to be completely transparent, I was a pothead. Tried other drugs to try to eat. And realistically, when I look back, I thought I was doing it for fun. I thought I was doing it because it's what my friends were doing. I thought I was doing it. Really what it was is like I was missing something. Like there was a part of me that was hurting. And my solution, my own self-given diagnosis was, there's something about you that's broken. Take this and that'll mask what's there. So I tried drinking, I tried girls, I tried pretty much everything. Yeah, I was not living for the Lord at all. I was still going, and that's the thing about it was that I was still going to church. Like my parents, like it was never an option. Like my parents literally told me, I don't care what you do on a Saturday night. Like Sunday morning, you're going to church. Like if you're gonna rebel and leave, even though we tell you you're not supposed to, you're gonna run out of the house and go live like that. Like that's your own choice to make. We don't condone that, but at the same time, like you're still gonna be at church on Sunday morning as long as you live in this house. And so like I would party all night on Saturday morning, go to church, and like that was my life for my whole high school years. And so I get to 18, and I was just depressed. No other way to put it. Hated my life. Hated how I looked. Hated I mean, I can't think of a positive thing I would ever have to say about myself. I look in the mirror and just was disgusted and just really struggled. And I got to the point where I never attempted suicide, but I got to the point where my thought process on a daily basis was suicidal. I would start to think like, what would the world look like if I wasn't here? How would my parents respond? Would people even care? What would my funeral look like? Would people even come to my funeral? And all these thoughts that like naturally a person shouldn't have, those were my thoughts on a daily, consistent basis. And I remember I went to this summer camp, and while we were there, just in a moment of worship, like I just finally was like, God, I have literally tried everything the world has to offer that's supposed to ease your pain, and I'm still hurting. I guess I'll try you. Like literally just hit this moment of like, I guess, like, since I've tried everything else, like literally God was my last option. I was like, God, I've literally tried everything else and it's not worked. But here you are, I'm at this camp. Okay, God, like I'll give you my all and see what happens. And I did, and for the next several years, I just saw a crazy transformation in my life. I saw God begin to ease some of those pains. And then when I turned 20.
Before you turned 20, you had a truck at 18. What you put on that truck?
I tried to skip past this part because I didn't want to tell you. So y'all, first of all, let me tell you about this truck. Because y'all, I can't even, so it was a Chevy S10. Y'all know the old S10s. And I had a bed cover with a spoiler on the bed cover. I didn't tell you about all this other stuff. I had airbags, but it wasn't like nice, like hydraulic airbags. Like they were literally like airbags that like I'd have to push a button and let it. So I could like lift my vehicle in the front or the back. So ugly. It's the worst vehicle ever. And it like had these exhaust pipes that were like you could hear me coming for probably 3 miles, like not exaggerating. I got cops calling me all the time. I got pulled over all the time. Like it just was terrible. But whenever I got saved, it was living for the Lord. On the back, I got some vinyl to put on the back of my truck so I could represent God, and it said "Born Again Gangsta." But gangs, S-T-A, G-A-N-G-S-T-A, Gangsta, Born Again Gangsta. And so I had this on the back of my truck, rolling around town. Everybody knew me. I lived in a smaller town too, so like everybody knew me because of my truck. My truck was super loud, and I was the dude that had Born Again Gangsta on the back. And yeah, I told him about that. He was dying in my office. It's like he said.
Yeah, the Born Again piece of the vinyl, did that always stay on there?
Okay, so that's where we did. So when I was 20 years old, and I didn't tell you the reason why I even slipped away at 20, but when I was 20 years old, my best friend from high school committed suicide. And I was 2 years older than him, so he was a senior year of high school at the time when I was 20. And he was a college-bound athlete, stud of a dude who's gonna go play soccer at North Carolina. And he, in one day, lost his girlfriend, not like dead, but like she broke up with him, like it was the love of his life, and she broke up with him. He lost his scholarship because they were on one of their road trips that they were on. He threw something out of the bus, it hit a car, the car crashed, the person in the car died. So it just basically had all this crazy stuff happen to him in a day. And it just was too much for him to handle. He ended up committing suicide. And so when that happened, I took it personally for some reason, and I let it really affect me negatively. And I went back to all the pain and depression that I had just spent the past 2 years of allowing God to fix. I went back into that because of his situation. And so 20 years old, 21, 22, I was back in like hell again. And to go off of the sad suicide story into the back to the truck, you know, I wasn't a born-again gangster anymore. And so I was just a regular gangster now. And so I took off, I literally peeled off the born-again part. And so my truck literally just said gangsta on the back of it for the next couple of years. And yeah, so I was a thug. That was Thug Nasty back in the day. Anyways, so I was 20 years old, and everything in my life, I feel like my life's falling apart again. And you're gonna ask me something else? Or just keep going? Okay, cool. And I went through this for 2 years, and so 22 comes around, and it's April of 2005, and this is so vivid in my memory, is here I was again at that rock bottom moment that I had told you guys I was at that summer camp. I was at the same place. But this time I realized, God, you started to work for me, and I gave up. What if this time I did it again and allowed you to fix me all the way? So April of 2005, I gave my life back to the Lord, rededicated to Him, was reminded of a call to ministry that I had in my life from when I was a 12-year-old kid, and ended up going to Bible school at Raymond. I signed up in Tulsa in 2005, August. So 4 months later, I went from living a life of partying and sin to 4 months after that, being at Bible school, pursuing a call to ministry. So obviously what happened since that.
So you said you knew you had a call to ministry. There's some people who say, okay, I want to figure out what God's called me to do. What's my purpose? So for you, how did you know you're called to ministry? How does someone know that God's calling them to do something?
It's kind of a tough question because it's different for everyone. The cool thing about God, and that's why I love how God is and how creative He is, because God will speak to people based on how you listen. So I could sit up here and tell you how God, and I will gladly tell you how God spoke to me, but I don't say it as a discouragement to you, because God might speak to you in a different way. God might show you in a different way. The key in the whole moral of it is that you need to be close enough to God to hear it. He's going to speak differently to you based on your personality, based on the things that you love. Perfect example, we just had a youth conference a couple weekends ago, and there's a student that we have that she's an artist, and she loves to do art. And in one moment I was able to encourage her with a scripture that the Bible tells us that we are His workmanship, His masterpiece. And I was explaining how God looks at us like a work of art. And I was able to encourage her by telling her, you know how you feel whenever you look at a piece of art that you spend hours creating, and you just look at it and you're so proud of that piece of art? That's how God looks at you. He looks at you and says, man, this is my masterpiece. I created this. I shaped this. I molded this personality, the outside look, everything about you. God looks at you and says, I did that. And so that's a powerful message for all of us, but for somebody who does art and understands what it looks like to look at something with pride that you've created, for her was a transformational moment. And she's been different ever since our conference, because she's like, wow, God literally came and spoke language that I would understand. And that's how this is. When you're seeking purpose, I just encourage you, be close enough for God to speak to you. There's a lot of people out there that complain about not knowing their purpose, yet they're so far from God they can never hear Him tell them. And so it's just a powerful thing for you to remember, is be close enough to God to be able to hear when He's speaking. For me personally, it literally happened on accident. We were doing some special play production thing for our children's ministry, and I got to be Jesus and do the Sermon on the Mount.
They picked the wrong person.
They did. Yeah, they did. They did pick the wrong person. But I was still holy back then, so I was still, I could have walked on water, I think, but that's a joke. I can actually walk on water, but no, but I got to play Jesus and give the Sermon on the Mount. And while I was doing that, I literally was like, this is cool. I could talk in front of people all the time. And so I knew for me, it was more of a vocation. Here's the thing, is that you have to recognize there's several calls to ministry. We're all called to ministry. All of you guys are called to ministry. The Bible tells you that you are called to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Your preaching of the gospel will look different than mine, most likely, though. I think that for a long time in the church that I grew up in, you weren't called to ministry unless you were called to be a pastor. Everyone else just kind of existed. And that's probably been one of the best things I've learned, is that we're all called to ministry. Every single person is called to ministry. You might be called to minister in the business that you create. You might be called to minister through the music industry you're going into. You might be called to minister through the job that you just work at, or the stocking groceries at Walmart. You might have somebody come across your aisle that needs Jesus, and it's your responsibility to minister to them. Like literally, ministry is so broad. And so for me personally, I knew there was a specific call, vocational pastoral ministry. And so I guess that's just the difference.
So you get into ministry, you get married, and you draw closer to God. And then you and your wife find out that you're pregnant. And I know this is a vulnerable piece of your story, but I want you guys to go in and just talk about the details, the whole situation.
Yeah, for sure. So for those who all was there whenever I spoke upstairs, just so I can have reference points. So there's a decent amount of you that can hear my story. So me and my wife get married in 2010. Same year, got married in 2010. A year later, we find out that we're pregnant. So 2011. And during that time also, I had just graduated from Bible school, and we were serving at a youth ministry that was about 45 minutes away from where we lived. And it was in a different town in Oklahoma, a small town. And we were serving in the youth ministry. We weren't attending the church on Sunday mornings. And so I didn't like that personally. And so I told my wife, I said, let's pray and see if God would want us to move closer to the church so that we could be involved in not just the youth ministry, but in the church as a whole. And so we prayed and we decided, yes, that's a move for us. And so while my wife was pregnant, early on in the pregnancy, we decided to move to Muskogee, Oklahoma, a small town, and to serve at this church that we're at and work in this youth ministry. And it's a great youth ministry, like had 120 students in the church of like 100 probably. Youth ministry was blown up. Youth pastor was phenomenal, next level minister, great. But we moved out there in August of 2011, and then by October, so 2 months later, the youth pastor and his wife come over to our house to tell us that they're getting a divorce because he cheated on her with the worship minister and got the worship minister pregnant of the youth ministry. And so here we are, we just moved our whole lives to this church, realistically because he was my mentor at the time. And so that was a very difficult moment because now I'm like, okay, God, what the heck do we do? Like, we moved out here to be a part of the ministry that he was there. We prayed, it didn't feel like we could continue going to that church because we were super hurt by everything that took place. And so now we're in this small town with no church to attend, but at least my wife was pregnant. So like that was the positive thing. We're like, well, it sucks that this happened at the church, and like this crazy, like the youth ministry died within a month. They went from 120 to no students in a month. Like it just could not sustain. Small town just couldn't sustain that type of situation taking place. And but we're still pregnant. So that's something to be excited about. We're like, let's just do it. Let's rock this small town life. And December 15th of 2011, my birthday, we go to the doctor to find out what sex the baby is. And best moment ever to find out that it was a boy. I have always wanted a boy first. I always said I want to have a boy first and daughter second because I want my son to be able to beat up anybody under 18, and then I'll take care of any guys over 18. Like we got this mutual agreement where you can beat up anybody that tries to mess with my daughters, like we got to take them care of. And so, but I always wanted a son first. I want to be able to have a baby boy first. Like this was this exciting moment of like, we're going to have a boy. And so that was December 15th. The 25th, Christmas Day, we go to my in-laws' house, and we're there. All the presents that day are all about our baby boy. So like we're getting all kinds of clothes and toys, and I mean everything you can imagine for a kid. It was just a great Christmas. We didn't get any presents for ourselves, but it was okay because we're like, we have a kid now. Like this is more exciting to get stuff for our baby than it is for ourselves. And we're getting all this stuff, and then that night, we have a 45-minute drive home to our small town, and on the way home, everything's fine. We're talking about the presents we just got, and how we're going to use them, and all these different things. And we get home, and my wife said, I got to go to the bathroom. I was like, that's fine, you run inside, I'll get the gifts, it'll be fine. And so while I'm getting the gifts, I hear my wife, I'm still outside, I hear her scream. And never good to have a person scream, especially a pregnant woman when she screams. It's a pretty urgent situation. And so I run into the house, and I'm like, what's wrong? And she tells me, she goes, I'm bleeding like really bad. Something's wrong. And I was like, okay, let's go to the hospital. So we load in the car, go to the hospital. While we're at the hospital, she is bleeding a lot, but good news was that the baby's heartbeat was still there. So we were looking at I don't know what this is, we need to figure it out, but there's it's still positive. We hadn't hit a negative moment yet, baby was still alive. They did verify heartbeat. And then we were there for a little while and the bleeding stopped. And so okay, this is even better. So they were trying to come up with a solution, why did the bleeding start? It stopped now, so clearly everything's okay, right? Trying to figure it out. And then right before we were about to get discharged, she starts bleeding again. And they're like, we don't know what's wrong. We're gonna have to send you to Tulsa, which is about, like I said, about 45 minutes away, to a bigger hospital that's more equipped to handle situations like yours. So when I tell you that was the longest 45 minutes of my life, still to this date, following in my car behind the hospital, behind the ambulance that my wife was in, just questioning. No clue what's going on, no clue what's happening. First kid, don't know what to expect, don't know what we're walking into, don't know what's causing this. So I literally called 3 of my closest friends who were prayer warriors and said, I don't want anybody to know this that doesn't have faith. Like, I need people to pray. Like, I don't know why, I don't know what's happening. Like, I just need people to pray. And so we get to the hospital, and they finally, after doing several things, finally discover that she has an incompetent cervix, which incompetent cervix simply means the cervix, for the guys, this would be more helpful for you, some of the ladies probably know, but cervix is what essentially keeps the baby in the womb during the pregnancy. If the cervix is incompetent, that means that it can't handle the weight of the baby as the baby grows, and it causes for early labor, basically. And so essentially my wife was going into labor at 21 weeks, and at this time it was 20 weeks and 5 days, I think. So significantly earlier than a baby's supposed to go. And so they literally try everything. When I tell y'all that they had my wife upside down to try to see if they could get gravity to force the baby to go back in, but essentially baby was half in, half out. And wife was in a ton of pain. It was just a miserable moment. And finally the doctors come in and say, listen, we're gonna have to, this baby needs to be birthed all the way. Otherwise it's gonna start causing problems for your wife. And they're like, but we need to know what you want to do. So here's some crucial questions that you guys need to talk about. 1, do you want to incubate this baby? But here's the thing with incubation. If you incubate this baby, because of where it's at in development, its lungs aren't developed enough to really survive in the incubator. If you decide you still want to do it, there's a 5% chance of survival. Within that 5%, so even if things are positive on that end and then 5% happens for you and the baby survives, there's still another 95% chance that the baby's going to have severe developmental issues, whether physical or mental. Now you need to decide, do we incubate the baby, or do you just enjoy your time with him, and then what? Then they said, then the second question, you decide if you choose the second option of not incubating, do you even want to see your baby, or would you rather just not even deal with it, just completely be like, good, I don't want to see it. And when I tell that story now, I feel like it seems like the choice is obvious. I feel like it seems like, well, of course, just incubate the baby, give it a chance. Give it a chance to survive, give it a chance for God to do a miracle, give it a chance for heaven to intervene and see something miraculous happen. And it seems, on the outside looking in, but when I tell you, when you're in a situation, when you're facing a storm, everything looks different on the inside of the storm than it does when you're on the outside looking in. And me and my wife talked about it, we prayed about it, we cried about it, but we both felt a peace about not incubating. And when I tell you that was the hardest decision I've had to make in my life and hopefully ever have to make, because not only that, I had friends in my life who were people of faith who came at me bro, you don't have enough faith to see God do a miracle? Let me just tell you this, if you have a friend that goes through something like this, don't say that to them. That's one of the most damaging things to somebody's faith that could possibly happen. But long story short, we actually even told them, we were even on the end, we were so hurt and so broken and lack of sleep for several days, being in the hospital. We straight up even told them, we don't even want to see the baby. We think it'll be easier for us to cope if we just say, just like a miscarriage would be. It just happened, we didn't need to see it. So we even told them we didn't want to see the baby. And so doctor comes in and they forced birth, which was terrible, watching my wife go through that. And then we're standing there, and our plan, like I said, was to not see him at all. And my wife's father goes and he's like, I don't care if y'all don't want to see him, I do. So he goes with the nurse to wherever they were taking him to see him. And he goes out and he comes back, and her father is the most, he's just imagine a person that's super monotone. They don't laugh at jokes, they don't cry at sad things. They're literally just blanket emotions. You never know what they're thinking, you never know what they're feeling. He's hard to read because of that. When I tell you he comes in hysterical, crying, and just saying, you have to see him. You have to see him. He's beautiful. He's perfect. And I don't usually cry telling this story, but rethinking that part, He just comes in and he was just like, you can just tell. And as soon as he did that, I knew, like, if he says it and he has that reaction, like, there's something in that we need to see too. And so I go and get him. And when I tell you that this dude was maybe the size of my forearm, he weighed less than a pound, but his features were perfect. Like, he literally looked like his face was fully developed. And it was amazing because his skin was see-through. And so I was able to hold him while literally watching his heartbeat. So I'm holding him, watching his heartbeat, talking to me. And the cool part is that the doctors told us that we'd maybe have 30 minutes with him being alive. And that was one of the first miracle moments for me, was that he lived for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So we got a lot of time to be able to, like, be with him alive. There was power in the fact that we could see his heart beating. And one of the best moments for me also was, while I'm holding him, I just remember looking down and saying, Grayson, I love you, and I'll get to see you in heaven. And when I did that, I saw like a flinch, and doctors say it's impossible for that to have happened, but like I saw it. And I was like, even if God flinched him for me, just so that I could know that like he heard me. But it just gave me this sense of knowing that like, dude heard me. Like, he knows that his dad loves him. He knows that, you know. And so,
and to me, that's even God working in the moment. Like God says in the Psalms, He's close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit.
yeah.
And I was obviously you in that moment, and God just showing something as simple as a flint to show you that, okay, I'm with you, He's at peace, and that what you're saying to Him is true. So to me, that's super, it's amazing to see God work through that.
Yeah, for sure. And then just to continue, because the story unfortunately doesn't just end with that happy moment. You know, here I am again facing one of the most difficult storms that I've ever gone through in my life. Me and my wife are fairly newly married. You know, this has the potential of destroying an early young marriage. And here we are with having lost our first child. And y'all, I like realistically went through a season for the next 6 months where I was done with God. Like, I was just like, I'm done trying to serve you. I gave you the chance to change me and to heal me, and then you let this happen after I moved my whole family to a small town with nothing, watched the church fall apart. And then it frustrated me even more. Like, just to be transparent with y'all, dude just cheated on his wife and got a chick pregnant, and they had a healthy baby. We had 2 students in our youth ministry, 16 years old, they get pregnant and have a healthy baby. All around the same time we lost ours. So when I tell you that comparing my situation to others literally almost destroyed me, because I was so mad at God. Like, God, how the heck are you going to allow me in the middle of my marriage, while I'm pursuing you and the call for my life? I should be at the perfect place to watch God see me have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. But you have these 2 situations where people are living in sin and their babies come out healthy. So when I tell you that alone, that mindset that I had during that literally almost destroyed me. It destroyed my desire to serve God. It destroyed anything positive in my life was like, God, you're terrible. Everything that I've taught teenagers, everything that I've tried to teach others, everything that I've seen, all the things in the Word that I read all the time, like, it's all a big myth. Like, it's a big myth.
So what brought you back tonight?
So what brought me back?
We're just closing back to that on that question.
So what brought me back was on the day that he was due, was early May of 2012. So this had been now 6 months. He was born on December 27, 2011. So 6 months after his birth was his supposed due date, his initial due date. And so, of course, on this day, I went to go to his grave site. We got one of the nice grave markers that actually had, like, it's really, really cool. It's got, like, his pictures on it and stuff like that. So, like, whenever we go to see him at his grave site, we actually can see pictures of him that the hospital took for us, so it was really, really cool. So I was like, I'm going to go to the grave site to visit, like, on the day that he was supposed to be here. And I remember going there. I took some friends with me because I knew I wouldn't be able to, like, probably drive after being there because I was just distraught at this season. And I kneeled down on the ground in front of his grave marker and then just, like, hysterically, like, the hardest cry that you could imagine, like, just huffing and puffing, breathing hard, like, just struggling, like, just hysterically crying and just so hurt and so broken. And then all of a sudden, while I'm down there on my knees, I feel like what felt like a weighted blanket on my shoulders. And I literally remember looking up at my friend because I thought they had put something on me. And I see my friends were just there praying. They were praying over me, but they didn't give anything to me. And then the Lord told me, "This is my peace. This is my peace." And I felt such an overwhelming peace in that moment. You know, the Bible talks about there's a peace that passes all understanding. And I felt that peace. Like, I didn't understand it. I didn't know why I had peace. I didn't know how I could have peace. I literally went in an instant, had this miraculous peace moment of being completely broken to then having this peace from God that was so strong. And just to end on this one thing, because I think it's valuable for people. I've told you some of the story, but really up to this point in my life, my whole faith with God has been this roller coaster ride. These waves of, if my circumstances look good, I was probably serving God with all my might. If circumstances look bad, and I told you about those times when I slipped into depression and different things, but that didn't change. Even going to Bible school, even getting married, like my life and my faith with God was literally like this. And God used that moment to show me this. Now, if you were in main service, Pastor Jesse talks about the story of the storm and how Jesus calms the storm. And what's incredible, and I was sitting here thinking, knowing I was going to come in here, what's incredible about a storm is this, is that no matter how bad the storm is on the surface of the water, the deeper you go, the less that you know that the storm even exists. And what God was showing me is that if you have a shallow relationship with God, you are going to feel every wave of life. If your relationship with Him is just on the surface, you'll feel every wave, you will feel every storm, you'll be tossed, you'll be turned, you will struggle to breathe, you'll struggle to swim, life will be a struggle. But the deeper you dive into your relationship with God, the less the storms. It doesn't mean the storms aren't there. And I think that's the important thing to know, is that just because you get close to God doesn't mean storms go away. Storms will be there. But the closer you are to Him, the less that those storms affect you. And that's what I saw, is that this situation, feeling God's peace like this, literally took my life of being a surface level Christianity and a surface level walk with God to then diving deep and saying, God, I'm going to get as deep into who you are as I can to ensure that when storms do come, I don't feel them as much, because I understand that I'm grounded in you and my anchor is in you.
It's good. It's good. It's good. Thank you. To me, that's just awesome. Just your whole story with it. You talk about God just giving you a peace, a peace that transcends all understanding. And God also talks about He's not the author of confusion, but of peace. And when we're in storms, we're in situations we don't understand, like, God will give us peace, but He wants us to show Himself. God's not the author of confusion. Anytime we go through a situation, a storm, God wants to reveal His strength, how He's with us, walking through us in every situation, how we can trust Him in every situation, how He's bigger than every situation.
Sure.
And it's so, so amazing that you allow God to do that. And so I just want to thank you for your relationship with God. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for finding purpose in your pain. And so it's so, so important that we're able to do that and to give God glory in every single situation.
Yeah, and then just to brag one more time before you finish. Now here I am. That was in 2011, so 9 years later. Have 3 beautiful kids. My walk with God is as strong as it's ever been, and continuing on the daily to get stronger. So God was faithful. We went through that terrible situation. Our first pregnancy with our son was tough, but after that, the cool thing is I don't even tell this story enough. God healed my wife of that incompetent cervix as well. We were high risk our entire pregnancy with Gavin, who's 7 years old now. Both of my other kids, we started high risk because of our history. Both times we've been let go by the high risk doctor to say everything's healthy, everything looks good. And so, my wife is healed of that, and like I said, we have 3 beautiful kids, and man, I'm just thankful to see what God has done in our lives. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome.